What's up YouTube, this is Demkeys back again with another Unity tutorial, and today you're going to learn about light cookies. Cookies are an interesting way to add a lot of visual detail to your scenes. They're basically grayscale textures that you use to control the precise look of your in-game lighting. Now, what are grayscale textures or grayscale images? Grayscale images are images in which the value of each pixel only carries intensity information. Such images generally contain shades of gray, black being the weakest intensity and white being the strongest. Now this explanation may not make a lot of sense to you. If it seems a little confusing, it's alright. As we progress in the tutorial, you will start to understand exactly what grayscale textures are. Alright, so what we have here is an empty scene with the main camera. We won't really require the main camera, so let's delete it. The first thing you want to do is add a plane. Maybe make it big, stretch it out a little, and next make a duplicate of this plane and rotate it at a 90-degree angle, and then just place it on the side, basically making a sort of wall. Alright, so Unity provides some light cookies within its light cookies package, which is a standard assets package. Let's go ahead and import that package and use those cookies, and after that we'll proceed with designing our own cookies. Okay, so to import the light cookies package, right click in the project panel and click import package, and you should see light cookies over here because light cookies is a standard asset package. Make sure all of these options are checked and click import. Now once the package has been imported, you should see a standard assets folder, and within that will be a light cookies folder, and within that you'll see these 5 cookies. Now first let's add a light to our scene. Let's add a spotlight. Now because I've made this plane quite big, so we might need to increase the intensity of the light. But anyways, you can see the light over here. I'm just gonna change the spot angle, stretch it a little bit. Alright, so when you select your spotlight, under the light component you should see a property called cookie. Currently it's set to none. That's why you see this plain texture over here. If you click this circle with the dot, you can actually select which cookie you want to set. Ignore these, just select one of these. Let's go with square first. You can see the effect over here. It now looks as if the light is coming through a mesh. You don't have to go through this same process. You can just drag and drop. So I'm gonna drag this flashlight cookie into this, and you can see the effect. That's much better. You can experiment with all these cookies and see what effect they have. Alright, so this is good, but let's move on to creating our own light cookies. Now it's recommended that you create your grayscale textures using applications like Photoshop, but for the sake of simplicity and also because I don't have Photoshop, I'm going to use Paint. Alright, so once you've opened up Paint, make sure the dimensions of your image are to the power of 2. That means dimensions like 128 by 128, 256 by 256, 512 by 512 or 1024 by 1024. You get the point. In our case, we are going to use 256 by 256 and hit OK. The first thing you need to do is make the entire image black. Next, just start scribbling onto it. You can zoom in. I'm assuming you are using Paint as well. I recommend you do so, just, so you can keep up with the tutorial. Alright, so just randomly start scribbling white, gray or dark gray shades onto this image. Don't worry about what kind of a design it is. It can be really ugly, doesn't matter. Okay, so I've got this image over here. It's got black, white, light gray, or I guess that's just gray, and then dark gray. I might be confusing them, but you get the point. It's got these four colors. You should not add any of these colors over here because this is a grayscale image. Now save the image. You can name it whatever you want. I'm gonna call it Spotlight. No, we're gonna use this on a directional light, so call this directional light cookie. Once you've saved the image, import it into Unity, just a simple drag and drop, and the image is imported into Unity. It is imported as a texture, so you need to change it to cookie, and once you change it to cookie, you have a couple of options over here. First of all, you have light type. This specifies what type of light you're making the cookie for. It could be a spotlight, a directional light, or a point light. Let's select directional because we are going with directional light for this example. We'll check out the others as well. Next, you have alpha from grayscale. If enabled, an alpha transparency channel will be generated by the image's existing values of light and dark. So basically, it's a grayscale image, and if we want, like I mentioned earlier, black is the weakest intensity and white is the strongest intensity. So what's going to happen is black is going to be pretty much invisible and white is going to be very much visible. You'll see what I mean. You can hit apply. I'll explain these two options later. Before applying the cookie to a directional light, you need to have a directional light in the scene. So go to game object, light, directional light, and as you can see, our entire platform over here, our entire plane has become white. Now let's add this texture to the directional light. You can see the effect. Under cookie in directional light, specifically only directional light, you have cookie size. Currently the number is set to 10. Change this to 2 and see what happens. It looks as though it's zoomed out. Change it to say 30. Now it looks really zoomed in. Watch what happens when I rotate this light. Alright, so this is just a flat surface. These are two flat surfaces. The texture looks good. Let's see what happens when this directional light falls onto other 3D objects. So let's add a couple of 3D objects to our scene. You don't need to be very particular about this. Just place whatever you want, uh, set whatever size you want. It doesn't even have to touch the ground, but I'm gonna make it touch the ground. Also, I'm gonna add a sphere, and maybe a capsule. Alright, so now you've got a couple of images over here. Sorry, you've got a couple of 3D models over here. Let's try rotating the light and see what effect it has on our images. Sorry, again, our objects, our 3D models. As you can see, the texture has been applied, the cookie has been applied, and that effect is not only shown on the plane, it's also shown on these 3D objects. If you change the cookie size, let's make it 5. So this is how you use directional light cookies. Now let's try some other cookies. Now let's try making a spotlight cookie. Go back to paintbrush, or sorry, paint, and create a new file. Zoom in a little, make sure the dimensions are 256 by 256. Go over the same process, make the background black, and start scribbling. But in this case, wait, sorry, don't start scribbling. Make a specific design or some sort of logo that you want to show. Let's say, in my case, maybe N. Make sure you don't draw all the way to the end. There has to be a black border around this image. If there's no black border, then okay, let's apply this texture to our spotlight, and then I'll explain what's gonna happen if you don't make sure that there is a border around the image. Save this image as spotlight cookie. Import it into Unity. Go over the same process. It's imported as a texture. Change it to cookie, and it's already set to spotlight, so you don't need to change that. Make sure alpha from grayscale is checked, and leave these two. I'll get to it soon. And then hit apply. Now we already have a spotlight in our scene. Let's disable the directional light and change the intensity of, in fact, change some of the properties of the spotlight. I'm going to make this a little thin and increase its range, increase the intensity. I think I've reached the limit. Alright, now apply the cookie. As you can see, Now you'll notice it's starting to get erased over here. This is because of the range of our light. This is not a design, it is still a light that is being flashed upon a certain surface, but there's a cookie applied to it, and that's where you see the light being shown like this. So this is how you create spotlight cookies. Oh yes, I mentioned to you earlier that you should make sure there is a border around, a black border around the image, and make sure that your design isn't, well, yeah, make sure that there's a black border around the image. The reason for that was, if you don't make sure of that, you're actually going to have some sort of leaking effect shown over here around at any of the edges of the image, because you don't have a border around it. Remember, the black color basically means completely transparent. So if you have a black background, if you have a black border around the image, it looks more clean. And it's quite useful in the case of spotlights. But hey, it depends upon what kind of effect you're aiming for. Next, let's take a look at point light cookies. Go back to Paint, create a new uh, file, zoom in, make the background black, and start scribbling. You don't need to worry about the border in this case. Now save the image. I'm going to save this as point light cookie. And then import it into Unity. Alright, now let's add a point light to the scene. Increase its intensity. And place it somewhere near this area so we can see its effect. Oh, we can also increase its range. Sorry about that. Okay, so go over the same process, change it to cookie. In this case, light type is going to be point. And then you have some more settings showing up over here. We'll go over them later. For now, just check alpha from grayscale, hit apply, and then apply this cookie. You'll notice it now has the icon of a cube map. Um, you'll understand why once we apply the cookie to the point light. As you can see, the cookie works just fine. Now, why did this become a cube map? This is because point lights basically give out um, light rays or shoot light rays in all directions. So in order to have this texture shown by a point light, it has to be a cube map, because a cube map has I believe 6 sides. Yeah. Now if we were to add another plane, let's make a duplicate of this and set it here, and let's make another one and set it here. Now when you rotate the light, you can see the effect. We have our 3D objects over here. We have these sort of walls over here. The light is actually affecting all the sides. You'll notice this wasn't the case with spotlight, and the effect in directional light was slightly different from this. This is the reason why it has to become a cube map. Now let's take a look at some of the options under point light type. First of all, you have mapping. Mapping has 5 options. You have sphere mapped. This maps the texture to a sphere-like cube map. You have cylindrical. This maps the texture to a cylinder. You should generally use this when you want to use reflections on objects that are like cylinders. Then you have simple sphere, which is what was selected by default. This maps the texture to a simple sphere, deforming the reflection when you rotate it. Next you have nice sphere, which maps the texture to a sphere, deforming it when you rotate it, but still you can see the texture's wrap. The texture's wrap basically means the start and end of the texture. Let's change this to nice sphere and hit apply. You might be able to notice this line over here. Watch what happens when I rotate the light. You'll notice the line moving as well. This is where the texture starts and this is the end of the wrap. So you can see that in many cases. This has its own use as well, of course. Let's take a look at sphere mapped. Hit apply. This has its own effect. Next you have cylindrical. Hit apply, and it looks different from what sphere mapped and nice sphere look like. Like I said, each of these has their own use. Alright, the last one here is 6 frames layout. Now this may seem a little complicated and my explanation may be a little confusing, but just try to keep up. If it does seem confusing, don't worry. Once we actually implement this, you will understand what it means. Alright, so 6 frames layout. The texture contains 6 images arranged in one of the standard cube map layouts, which is cross or sequence. And the images can be in either horizontal or vertical orientation. Now, to test this out, we will actually need images that have the aspect ratio of either 4:3 or 3:4, which would be for the cross method, or we should have a texture of the aspect ratio of 6:1 or 1:6, which would be for the sequence method. This texture currently which we are using has it's 256 by 256, so the aspect ratio is 1:1. So watch what happens when I hit apply. You'll see an alert over here, a warning. Texture does not match aspect ratio of standard cube map layouts. Cross would be so and so, or sequence would be so and so. Now let's go back to Paint and create a new file, but this time the dimensions are not going to be power of 2 dimensions. Let's set the height to 128 and set the width to, now since we are going for sequence first, we'll go for 1:6, and so no, we'll go for 6:1. So height would be 128 and the width would be height multiplied by 6. So that's 128 multiplied by 6, which is 768. Hit enter and then just zoom into the image. Do the same thing that you did before. Don't worry about any borders. You can go all the way to the end. It's no problem. Alright, so I'm gonna hit save and name this 6F SEQ for sequence cookie. Import this into Unity. Set this to texture type cookie, light type point, and mapping 6 frames layout. It's automatically gonna choose sequence because of the aspect ratio. And of course alpha from grayscale, make sure that's checked, and you can hit apply and then apply this cookie to our point light. If you notice, I don't know if you're able to notice this or not, but it actually looks like there is another cube within these walls as I rotate this object. As I rotate this light. It looks like you're within another cube and that cube is rotating. Similarly, we can have an image with the aspect ratio of 4:3. So that would be, just a minute, 128 multiplied by 4 would be 512. That should be the width, and the height should be 128 multiplied by 3, which is 384. You can have it the other way as well. You can have 512 as the height and 384 as the width. That's not a problem. Do the same thing. Just start scribbling on it. Don't worry about the border. Hit save and call this 6F cross cookie. Import this into Unity. Set the texture type to cookie, light type to point, mapping to 6 frames layout. Check alpha from grayscale, hit apply, and then set this as the cookie for our point light. Alright, now I had promised earlier that I would go over these two options. So what is filter mode? Filter mode selects how the texture is filtered when it gets stretched by 3D transformations. You have three options for filter modes: point, bilinear and trilinear. Currently bilinear is selected. Let's change it to point. Before that, what does point do? The texture basically becomes blocky up close. Pay attention to these sort of blurry steps that you see over here. When I select point, they become more sharp. Notice all the pixels over here, as opposed to bilinear, which makes the texture blurry up close. So this is bilinear and this is trilinear. Now bilinear, sorry, did I say trilinear? No, I meant this is bilinear and this is point. Now bilinear and trilinear have this option called an ISO level. I'm going to explain this shortly. First of all, what is trilinear? Trilinear is like bilinear, but the texture also blurs between different MIP levels. I'm not going to go into MIP mapping. You're going to have to do your research. Alright, an ISO level. This increases the texture quality when viewing the texture at a steep angle. It's good for floor and ground textures. A steep angle would be something like this. It's a very steep angle and we are trying to look at that section. I don't know if you'll be able to notice any difference when I change the ISO level. Hopefully in your texture, if your texture's detail is slightly different, you might be able to notice it. Bear in mind these are low resolution textures, so I'm not expecting a whole lot of change when I increase the ISO level. But here goes. Keep looking at this section because we are viewing this section from a steep angle. You notice a change in the texture over here. This is what an ISO level does. Now, fix up edge seams. Alright, now to understand fix up edge seams, you're gonna need to understand MIP mapping, and I can't go into that because I myself am not very good at it. Oh, by the way, this warning is from the previous texture. It's not from the current ones that we were using in 6 frames layout. This is, I just forgot to clear it. So these textures are not going to give you any warnings because they are following they have the aspect ratio of 6:1 or 1:6 or 4:3 or 3:4. Alright, one last thing before we end the tutorial. I mentioned to you that cookies are grayscale textures and so they only have shades of gray. This doesn't mean that your light can only be of that color. You can actually set your light to whatever color you want through the color property. Alright, so this is how you use light cookies. I hope this tutorial was helpful. Do check out these other videos as well. The video on the top left teaches you how to use the line renderer. The video on the top right teaches you how to use lens flares, and on the bottom left is a playlist for the Unity 4.6 UI Tools series. I'm also accepting donations, so if you would like to help me out, you can send your donations to my PayPal email address, which is mentioned on the screen and in the description down below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Leave your comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.
This is what they say. What? How you feel, huh? This is what they say. What? Yo, started out with nothing, then I turned myself to something. Everybody wanna claim a nigga when they hear you buzzing. Don't nobody wanna claim you when they hear you bugging. Not known to tell stories, not known for fronting.